Hello, hello, all you lovely people. Professor Gray here. Yeah, we're wrapping up unit number 3. Yeah, this is the last module for unit number 3. So I know you know what that means. That means there is, unit number 3 exam on the way. As usual, I'll post a short video about that when we get there. But right now, hey, let's just wrap up unit number 3. Now recall, this unit has been a lot about normative ethics. So again, recall that normative ethics is about stating and defending basic moral principles. So the question here is, what are the correct basic moral principles? And we've been doing, a lot of normative ethics here in unit number 3. We've been trying to figure out if these basic moral principles ought to include consideration for others. How should we weigh your interests to the interests of others, benefit to you versus benefit to others. And after the introduction of the principle of equal treatment, it certainly seems that it's difficult to deny that, that people don't matter, other people don't matter. It seems that, this principle of equal treatment supports us having to care about others. Again, just so we remember the principle of equal treatment. Yeah, the principle of equal treatment says we should treat people in the same way unless there is a relevant difference between them. And so as we saw, just to rehearse it, this principle says that racism is wrong, and racism is wrong because there's no relevant difference between people based on their skin color. So we should treat people the same regardless of their skin color. Again, this principle suggests that sexism is wrong. And sexism, again, is wrong because there's no relevant difference between people based on gender. So we should treat people the same regardless of their gender. And once again, it also suggests that ethical egoism is wrong because there's no relevant difference between you and everyone else. So you and me and everyone, we should all treat each other the same by taking everyone's interests into account. And in the previous module, we looked at Jeremy Bentham's classical utilitarianism. Yes, this idea, a very complex idea that we saw in Jeremy Bentham. And recall that Bentham was a consequentialist, a very key feature of utilitarianism. Recall that consequentialism says that the overall goodness of outcomes, that is the goodness of the outcomes for everyone affected by them, is the only thing with intrinsic moral value. So Bentham, as we saw, rejects ethical egoism, and he does think you should care about the interests of others. Now, of course, Bentham was also a hedonist. So recall that, again, what does hedonism mean? It means that well-being is nothing other than happiness, understood as pleasure and absence of pain. And so because everything, every person can experience pleasure and pain, it's their capacity to suffer and their capacity to feel and experience joy and pleasure. Other people do that as much as you do. Yes, you can suffer, you can experience joy and pleasure, but so can everyone. And because of that, Bentham says, we have these capacities to suffer and to experience pleasure. Because we all have that capacity, that means that all pleasures, all pains, they all should get equal consideration. And that was Bentham's idea, right? Because remember, Bentham said that all that matters is the amount of pleasure. We're trying to increase the amount of pleasure in the world, reduce the amount of pain in the world. But the person experiencing the pleasure or the pain doesn't matter. Again, each person just is treated the same. What we care about is how much pleasure, how much pain is involved. And again, if I harm you, the problem isn't that you are suffering. That's not the problem. The problem is that your suffering is greater than whatever pleasure I might possibly get out of it. So again, it's the amount of your suffering that makes it wrong, not simply that it's you who is suffering. It's the amount that's at stake here. And that's what Bentham thinks matters. And again, Bentham is just using the principle of equal treatment. He is just saying to treat all people the same because there's no relevance difference between people, because all people are capable of experiencing pleasure and pain. And he says, again, the only relevant difference is the amount of pleasure and pain involved. That's what we will look to, not who's experiencing it, but how much or how little. And so Bentham thinks racism is wrong because skin color does not influence a person's capacity to feel pleasure or pain. So there's no relevant difference for Bentham on skin color. We're all the same, pleasure and pain. Again, Bentham for the same reason. And remember, I mentioned this, Bentham was a progressive, so he did think sexism and racism were wrong. But again, he thinks sexism is wrong for the same reason, because one's gender does not determine one's capacity for pleasure and pain. So again, there's no relevant difference between people based on gender. That we all experience. Can we feel these things? And again, Bentham thinks ethical egoism is wrong because your capacity for pleasure and pain is no different than that of any other person's. We all experience pleasure and pain. And so there's, again, no relevant difference. So you can just see that Bentham is doing exactly what we saw with the principle of equal treatment, but what he's focusing on is pleasure and pain. And there's no relevant difference between you and I or anyone that's based on that. It's only the different amounts that determine how we treat people differently. How much pleasure, how much pain's at stake here. And now here's where things can get interesting. Because again, Bentham thinks racism is wrong. Bentham thinks sexism is wrong. But also, Bentham thinks that speciesism is wrong. And you're like, now, whoa, what? Speciesism? What's this? Well, if you did the reading, you should know this, by the way. But fine. What is speciesism? Well, this is an idea that actually the word itself is coined by Peter Singer, but Bentham clearly agrees with it, even though Bentham doesn't give it a name. And speciesism just means the preference of humans over all other species of animal. So Bentham thinks this speciesism, this preference for humans over others, is wrong. And it's because species does not influence your capacity or that being's capacity for pleasure and pain. There is no relevant difference based on species, as long as that species is capable of experiencing pleasure and pain. So again, that's all that matters. And then we just go again, the difference then is how much pleasure, how much pain's involved. But Bentham thinks all sentient life experiences pleasure and pain. And as such, all sentient life is equal in that fundamental way. And so this makes utilitarians like Bentham and Peter Singer as well pretty unique, because they believe that all animals are equal, because all animals feel pleasure and pain. And so that's the topic of this module. Should we care about the interests of non-human animals? It's going to be fun. But before we dive into that, I think let's take a quick stretch just to, get focused. So again, refocus your eyes, relax for a minute, and then we can come back and start thinking about, the ways in which we'll compare humans and non-humans and start thinking about this. Are they really equal? Anyway, we'll talk about that in a moment. I'll see you right back here then.